Come on now, just like that.
In this video, Peter and his friends are looking for a new member to fill the spot left by Cleveland. During this process, they interview various candidates in search of someone who can fit into the group. Meanwhile, Brian discovers that Quagmire hates him. This revelation causes discomfort between them, and Brian tries to understand the reasons behind this feeling. The tense relationship between Brian and Quagmire can lead to comedic and challenging situations throughout this story. The Time Life Music channel is broadcasting about all the songs and hits of the Rat Pack Band. One of the vocalists appears to sing one of their most famous songs, like The Drunk Natives and Jewish Nose. Then, another vocalist named Jim Martin sings The Chinaman's Chants, and the former vocalist returns to sing Stinky French Creed. The three of them sing together. It's Alright Sissy.
You know, I'm sick of looking at that.
What?
That empty space. It just reminds me that Cleveland's not here anymore.
Back at the bar, now during the day, Peter, Joe, and Quagmire gather to find a new member. In the Griffin house, Lois, Stewie, Brian, and Peter are gathered. Lois, on the couch, asks Peter how the search for a new friend is going. Peter says it's not going well. Brian, intrigued, asks about this search for friends, and Peter explains that he's been trying to find a replacement for Cleveland for 3 days.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work out, Brian, because of the whole Quagmire thing.
What Quagmire thing?
Oh, just that he hates you.
Quagmire hates me?
Hates you.
Brian is disappointed and asks why Quagmire doesn't like him. Peter explains that Quagmire finds Brian boring. Back at the bar, now at dusk, Peter, Joe, and Quagmire gather once again. Joe, tired of the situation, comments that he didn't imagine it would be so hard to find a replacement for Cleveland. Peter states that they're overlooking the obvious and that they need someone of African descent. Quagmire agrees, saying that's what made Cleveland special. Joe admits he misses him. At that moment, a waiter approaches Peter, Quagmire, and Joe's table, suggesting they join a dart tournament with the prize being drinks for the whole night. Peter replies that they'd love to, but there are only 3 of them.
Did I hear some sorry-ass fools in need of a mother-loving fourth?
The voice belongs to Jerome, who approaches Peter and his friend's circle, stating that he'll join the dart game. Joe questions how they'll know if he's any good.
Gentlemen, we got us a black man.
So they leave the bar happy and laughing. It's already nighttime. Peter expresses to Jerome that they all had a fantastic night with his presence and praises him as a wonderful addition to the group. Jerome thanks him for the kind words and says he enjoyed them too.
What do you say we hit another bar? Keep it going.
I can't. There's a girl tied up in my basement who needs some food.
That's funny. You funny, pointy man.
With Jerome behind the wheel, he thanks Peter for giving him a ride home. Peter expresses that if he had time, he'd take him to meet his wife. Jerome responds by saying that he has time for everything. Arriving home, Peter and Jerome find Lois on the couch with Stewie in her lap. Peter introduces Jerome to Lois, and she's surprised to realize she already knows him.
Know each other? Peter, Jerome is an old boyfriend of mine.
What?
Oh, sorry, I was out of it. Wait, are we being robbed?
Then, before leaving, Jerome tells Lois that it was really nice to see her again and takes the opportunity to invite her for coffee any day and have a chat. Lois happily accepts the invitation, and Peter interrupts, saying it's getting late and Jerome probably has things to do. Peter, disappointed, questions Lois about their departure, and she asserts they're just friends. Peter expresses jealousy, and Lois mocks the situation, saying he's overreacting. Now, we find Brian and Stewie by the mailbox at their house. Stewie, on his tricycle, approaches Brian, saying that Chris Fryer had died. When Quagmire leaves the house to get the mail, Brian approaches him, suggesting they coincidentally met and asking how he's doing. Quagmire responds shortly and points to a bruised and tired-looking woman coming out of his house. Brian comments on her appearance.
That's my sister, Brian. Her boyfriend has been beating her mercilessly. The last thing she'd want right now is to be objectified.
Oh, God, I'm really sorry.
The scene shifts to the Drunken Clam bar, where Jerome, Quagmire, Peter, and Joe are together. Jerome tells jokes, Quagmire enjoys, and Jerome goes out to buy cheap brandy. Quagmire praises Jerome, but Peter, reluctantly, reveals that before marrying Lois, She and Jerome had a relationship. Joe tries to downplay the impact, but Peter expresses his concern. Quagmire defends Jerome, praising his personality, but Peter is hesitant, referring to past events that ruined friendships. In this scene, Peter, extremely affected by the revelation about Jerome and Lois, decides to drown his sorrows with alcoholic drinks in the street during the early hours. Clearly agitated by the situation, he ends up randomly arriving in front of Jerome's house. Observing Jerome watching television, Peter loses control and throws a beer bottle in his direction. The bottle nearly hits Jerome but hits his lamp, causing a fire. Next, Peter walks downstairs in his house and goes to the kitchen, where he finds Jerome and Lois. Surprised, he questions why Jerome is there.
Oh, Peter, something terrible's happened. Somebody burned down Jerome's house last night.
Yeah, well, when I find the guy who did it, I'm gonna rip his arms off and do his wife in front of him.
Lois tries to comfort Jerome, saying no one would blame him for reacting that way, and invites him to stay with them. Jerome thanks Lois and expresses his luck in having true friends like them. In the following scene, Chris and Peter are on the living room couch talking. Chris asks Peter how long Jerome will be staying with them. Peter responds that he doesn't know, but the sooner he leaves, the better. He expresses his distrust of Jerome, stating that he doesn't trust him near Lois for even a second. At that moment, they hear a strange noise coming from the kitchen.
Oh, God, Jerome, that is so good. Oh, yeah, it's so hot and moist.
And upon checking, they discover that Lois was just trying bread made by Jerome. Lois praises Jerome's baking skills, easing Peter's concern. An elderly man in the house asks Peter what's going on with all the commotion from Lois. Peter explains that everything is fine. Lois asks Peter if everything is okay, and he responds affirmatively. Then, Lois offers Peter some of Jerome's bread, but chokes on it. Meg, concerned, alerts everyone that her mom is choking.
Come on now, just like that.
And Stewie appears at the end of the scene, mentioning that he also wants what Lois had. On the second floor, Stewie discovers Brian getting ready for a date with Quagmire in his bathroom. Stewie is surprised because he thought Quagmire hated him and asks how Brian managed to convince him to go. Brian reveals that he tricked him, sending a fake card making him think he was going out with an ex-girlfriend. Stewie comments that it will be a big disappointment for Quagmire, comparing it to bringing flowers to an office full of overweight women. When Quagmire was about to meet his ex-girlfriend Cherry, he discovers inside his limousine that Brian was the one who wrote the fake invitation letter. Brian reveals that he planned a special night for them to have fun, but Quagmire, disappointed, confesses that Cherry was the love of his life, and he tries to fill the void she left by chasing after other women. Sad, Quagmire expresses the feeling of being lost forever. Brian tries to cheer him up by suggesting that a good steak could fill the void, but Quagmire starts crying. Brian proposes that they become friends, believing they could make a better duo than Lois and Clark or the guy who likes tearing up maps. At the Griffin house, Lois and Jerome are sitting on the couch, flipping through a wedding photo album. Lois shows Jerome pictures of her wedding with Peter, and he compliments them. At that moment, Peter appears dressed as a ghost, claiming to be ready for the night. Irritated, Lois asks why he's dressing like that, as well as Jerome. Peter tries to scare Jerome, but Lois asks him to take the costume off. Jerome is confused by the situation, and Peter reveals that he's nervous behind Jerome's intentions. Peter states that Jerome is no longer welcome in his house and tries to create a spooky scene, but Jerome doesn't understand. Lois asks Peter to stop and tells Jerome that he's still welcome. However, Peter continues to accuse Jerome, who, saddened, apologizes and promises never to bother Peter or his family again. Touched by the situation, Peter acknowledges the sadness of Jerome's farewell. In the restaurant, the steakhouse, Brian tries to cheer up Quagmire with jokes, but Quagmire grows tired of the attempts and ends up exploding in anger. He vents about all the reasons he doesn't like Brian.
You failed college twice, which isn't nearly as bad as your failure as a father. How's that son of yours you never see?
Quagmire ends the conversation by thanking Brian for paying for dinner. Back at home, Peter celebrates having the house to himself and Lois again. Lois overhears and comments that sometimes he makes her nauseous. Peter mentions that he thinks Jerome is a nice guy, but Lois insists on proving it to Peter. She reveals a gift that Jerome bought for Peter as a thank you for letting him stay at their house. Upon opening the present, Peter is greeted with an original Familadies sculpture made by Nick from recycled material. Lois says that Peter doesn't deserve it, but the gift should make him reconsider his actions. Peter acknowledges that he acted out of jealousy and apologizes to Lois. He realizes that Jerome is a good guy and decides to apologize to him as well. At this moment, Jerome is at the bar, playing darts alone, when Peter approaches and asks if he needs a friend. Jerome greets him but doesn't delve much into the conversation.
We cool, Peter, we cool. But listen, there is something I gotta fess up to. While I was living with y'all, I had myself lots of nasty-ass sex with Meg.
I don't care about that.
In the penultimate scene, Stewie finds Brian upset in his room and asks what happened. Brian reveals that it didn't work out with Quagmire, who still hates him. Stewie reassures Brian, saying that it's not necessary for everyone to like him, but that one person who appreciates him is enough, himself, and also expresses his affection for Brian. The story ends with a goodnight farewell and Brian leaving a message for the viewers and for Stewie.
Good night, Brian.
Good night, Stewie.
Oh, come on, man.